Hello, and welcome to my exhibit on Egon Schiele, A Short Life of Twisted Brilliance. Egon Schiele was an expressionist artist, which expressionism was a movement that began in the early 20th century and was mainly focused around Germany and Austria. They believed that the art should express the emotional state of the artist rather than describe the external world. So throughout this collection of Schiele's work, you will be taken through the story of his life. From his view of himself and his loves to where he lived to his final months of life, Egon Schiele, A Short Life of Twisted Brilliance, puts you in the shoes of this famous expressionist artist. So the early life of Schiele, his father was a train station master. He grew up in the train yard, just constantly sketching the trains around him. His father threw away his sketchbooks and sent him off to a boarding school in an attempt to get him to have an actual career. He was looked upon as the weird kid in school. He didn't really do very well. And at the age of 16, he applied and was accepted as the youngest student to Vienna's Academy of Fine Arts. He was only there for 3 years because he did not like the conservative, traditional teachings of art that he was learning. So he sought out a new mentor, which he found in another famous expressionist artist, Gustav Klimt. So the first painting we have on exhibit is Kneeling Nude with Raised Hands. This is a great example of his style in that his human forms were quite gangly and odd in proportion, and his colors were really different, not true to the aesthetic of a real human. He also he experimented a lot with exploring humanity and sexuality in people, which caused a lot of trouble throughout his life. So here's his most famous self-portrait, the self-portrait with the Chinese lantern plant. As you can see here, he's quite distorted. His colors are a little weird. He's definitely pointing out his flaws rather than what he likes about himself. And the fruit in the background is quite distracting. Now, comparing that to the portrait of Wally, which was a painting that he did alongside of his self-portrait, she is quite soft. Her colors are quite natural. Her face is obviously the main focus of the painting. And comparing these two, you can really see how he views himself versus how he views other people. So Wally grew up out of wedlock to a single mother and struggled growing up, did whatever she could to make ends meet, which means modeling and prostitution. Modeling was basically seen as prostitution back then. She modeled for Gustav Klimt, which he introduced her to Schiele, and they began a very professional relationship, which soon developed into a romantic relationship, and they moved from Vienna to Kruma, which was the birthplace of Schiele's mother. As you can see in this painting of Kruma on the left, the houses are an amber tone, the river is black. There are no people or cars or horses because instead he made the houses themselves the protagonists of the rendering by making them appear animated. The coloring also kind of tells us a little bit about his emotional state at the time. And after living in Kruma for about a year, the residents disapproved of his lifestyle and he was exiled from the city because most people did not like that he was painting children. Schiele was always fascinated by the human form, especially the female body, and many delinquent and rather poor children found that they could make a few dollars from Schiele's modeling. So in 1912, Schiele was arrested for seducing a 13-year-old girl, which was under the age of consent at the time. Many paintings were seized, and he was only charged with exhibiting erotic drawings in a place accessible to children, but he did spend 24 days in jail. So after this traumatic experience, children rarely appeared in his work again. It was never proven that he was like a pedophile or anything. He just really wanted to express all forms of the human body. In 1914, Schiele spotted a young girl walking by who ended up being Edith Harms, who he began to get to know and charmed and eventually wanted to marry. Wally, which many people thought he would marry, she was obviously the less socially acceptable option, but he brought her into a cafe and offered up the compromise that he would marry Edith, but every summer they would vacation without her. Wally refused the offer, and the two never saw each other again. Schiele and Edith were married in 1915, and Wally went to go be a nurse for the Red Cross and subsequently died of the scarlet fever in 1917. This painting, Death and the Maiden, is a portrait of Schiele and Wally that he produced after their breakup. It is obviously painted by someone very tortured in their emotions. The odd figures, the grotesque colors, are very expressive of his emotional state at the time. My favorite part about the painting is his blank stare that he has as he holds, his love that he is going to lose. But as time went on, his style became much more soft and calm. As you can see, there's only a 2-year difference between this painting and this painting, which is of his wife Edith. It was originally thought that this was a nude portrait, but because he didn't want to deal with all the backlash that he has already received for many years of drawing nude women, he clothed her. And this is one of his final paintings that he did in his life. In the fall of 1918, the Spanish flu pandemic reached Vienna, and Edith was 6 months pregnant when she succumbed to the disease, and Schiele died only 3 days later at the age of 28 years old. This painting depicts Schiele, his wife, and their unborn child. It is unlike his other paintings. They're quite normal colored, they're in quite non-provocative positions, and you can see in their long glares that they have accepted the fate that they know is coming to their family in the death by the Spanish flu. And in conclusion, Schiele is remembered for his disturbing and provocative work. He has pushed the box farther than anyone had before him, and his provocative and somewhat creepy work is why most people love his work today. Most of his work is housed in the Leopold Museum in Austria. And there's my works cited, and thank you very much.